And we welcome you to the 2026 draft season. It is Bob Sturm and my friend Dominic Robinson. Dominic, how are we, man?
Phenomenal, man. It's draft season, silly season. It's
It
time
is,
to
man.
go. We
It
had our
is time to go.
we had our short sit in with George, talked Cowboy draft, and now we're going to dig into the edges, what we think and who the best guys we like.
That's right. So, okay, it's the 2026 draft season. We're already into March. We've dragged our feet a little bit because we had to get through a lot of tape, and now we're prepared to start giving you regular episodes. We will present those to you in your various places to get them, so hopefully you know how to find us. I mean, if you're listening to us, you probably do. So let's give a little background of what we want to accomplish here. This is for, of course, the NFL Draft. It is sort of a companion piece to both the Sturm 60 and also the NFL draft coverage on the ticket in Dallas. And therefore, we are football nerds who are attempting to get you ready for the first 2 days of the draft for the most part. We're not going to be able to tell you a whole lot about round six, at least I'm not. And we're also going to do it from largely a Dallas Cowboys perspective. That means different things every year, except the one thing that stays the same is the frustration of missing the Super Bowl and things even close to the Super Bowl. And so it is our job to help find guys who can maybe someday solve that problem. And this year in particular, it means we've got to be all over the defense. And so expect this particular podcast, which last year claimed to not have a name, but this year we're going to go with the working title of Tape Over Traits because that's exactly how we feel, Dominic.
Yeah, man, and I think what we really established that our thing is not potential. You know, what we look at is we watch the game and we look for production. And so that sort of is the spearhead of our analysis is what do the guys show us on tape? Obviously tape, SEC tape is going to be a little bit more valuable. Big Ten tape is going to be a little bit more valuable, especially for your guys up front, your Ohio States and your Michigans and things like that. But we're looking for tape traits. We're not looking for combine traits. We want things that jump out on the tape. I'm constantly, like you said, you're pouring over tape. I'm pouring over tape. It can get real monotonous. And what we're looking for is guys that make us sit up, something that jumps off the tape. When it jumps on the tape, you make a note of it. And these are the guys that you obviously want to add to your team.
Yeah, and so we grade these guys. Everybody does it a little bit differently, but obviously, if you look at 50 guys, you want to have some idea of at least putting them in tiers, and then once you get in tiers, you want to separate them in order that you would pick them. But of course, that's going to be different because you could be one of any 32 teams. Or you could also have biases just from your own experience of what you like in a football player and what you don't like in a football player. And that is what makes this thing so subjective, so frustrating, so humbling. And yet at the same time, it is massively fascinating to those of us who try to project what happens to a 20-year-old who is handed a ton of money and a ton of talent and a ton of responsibility. By the time he gets to 30, what will his story be? And sometimes we can say, man, I knew it all along. I always think of Aaron Donald. The first time I watched Aaron Donald at Pitt, I thought to myself, this guy is so freaking good. I've never seen anything like this at the defensive tackle spot. Now, I've missed a ton, but there are times where it's just so clear to you that you're wondering what everyone else is missing. And so, when I say humbling, I do think we should start at, basically the start, which is, for me, I think I covered my first several drafts by buying magazines and going to the bookstore and buying a bunch of preview magazines And I thought that would be a great way to learn the draft. And it is on like the most surface level possible. But I found over the course of time that the people that make those magazines are doing the same thing we're doing, which is just watching football players. Maybe. Or maybe they're just copying someone else's list. Who can say? But the point is, I found their findings to be a little bit frustrating to me because I took their advice and then I'm putting Ryan Leaf in front of Peyton Manning is my favorite example. And so when you see something that's missed that badly in the future that you have to live with every Sunday for an entire Peyton Manning career, you then say, well, maybe I didn't do my own homework enough. And so that inspired me to dive in. And I guess the first draft I took super seriously was probably the Tyron Smith draft. And every year it gets a little more obsessive, but also every year you add a little more data to your brain, Dominic, and sometimes that makes you better at this, and actually sometimes you end up, running in circles. But that's kind of the inspiration is if we're going to talk about these guys, then I think we owe it to them and to the audience to have said, look, I watched this guy for 200 snaps. I gave him a couple hours one morning and really locked in on just him, not his teammates, not even just his opponent. I watched him play football, and I took notes, and I made observations, and then I tried to rank him against the other guys in his group and then the other guys at his position over the years. And it's not easy. Like I said, it's incredibly imperfect. So I always liken it to a baseball hitter. Because we talk about like Bill Belichick and people, what's so great about Belichick? He misses on this draft pick and this draft pick and this draft pick. And I said, listen, all Bill Belichick is Tony Gwynn. There's a bunch of major league hitters, but this guy has the best batting average. Now, Tony Gwynn would hit 330. So he would make an out a ton of times, 2 out of every 3. But he would hit better than everybody else. And so sometimes being good at this is a matter of being a 280 hitter instead of a 260 hitter. You just want to be the best hitter you can be. And that's really what draft evaluation or anything that you put your heart and soul into becomes. So I don't know what you thought of that setup from my standpoint, but feel free to carve your own or to build off it.
Yeah, I think one thing we discussed last year was we found out, we didn't know this, but we became draft buddies through our relationship through Dan, which Dan and I became buddies because my son was being recruited to Clemson. And
That's right.
And his daughter was in the Clemson band, and I brought Dan down on the sideline and all of that. And you and I got close over the years, and we've hung out at Super Bowls and gone to comedy shows, and but what we found out last year during this process was we both became enamored with the draft during the Peyton Manning Ryan Leaf year, 1998.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I actually watched Peyton Manning play in person at UCLA that year. It was my freshman year of high school. And I fell in love with the whole draft process, have watched every single draft, every pick essentially from that year up until now. And, so it's just super interesting that the two of us, sort of became such close draft buddies and fell in love with the draft in the same draft, kind of at the same time. And I think both of us had Ryan Leaf, correct? Were you a Ryan Leaf guy?
Oh, yeah.
Also?
Yeah, I was I was absolutely a Ryan Leaf guy.
And I think both of us were Ryan Leaf guys, and I think both of us were probably Ryan Leaf guys because of whatever media we were consuming.
Yes.
Which was probably for me largely Mel Kiper, and I don't remember Mel Kiper's stance right now, but I just know for a long time the only voice in this industry was his.
Yeah.
And so us draft nerds all listened to him, and then I became a player and realized, and some of these people that Mel was talking about were not only friends of mine, some of them were teammates of mine.
That's right.
And I realized that a lot of the things he was saying was not only slightly incorrect, but just madly false, just not even close, not even in the same ballpark. And so I think that was part of my process of wanting to do this and wanting to provide a perspective, mainly from a coach's standpoint, because I coach football. I'm football obsessed with the X's and O's and the schemes. I became close with Cody Alexander. He used to give me a lot of the information that I used to get, which I know he's a friend of yours and friend of your show.
Yes.
And then so he started giving me information, and I was wondering. And then I had a buddy who was an NFL scout, who was also, I would ask him questions, and he was getting me information quick. Like, I'd ask him for a guy, and I would think it's going to take him a day or two to get back to me. And then he would have, like, within 15 minutes, he'd have, a list of things that this guy is, or characteristics that this guy is or isn't on the draft. And I'm just like, man, how are you getting it so fast? Well, turns out there's a service that has film and information, any analytic number. And so I used to get those numbers from Cody. I would ask him, hey, what are the coverage rates for Clemson? And he'd say, oh, they run cover 3 this amount of time and cover 2. And I never knew where he was getting from. Well, I found out that it was coming from this service. And I was fortunate enough to have a coach, because I coached college at some point, that gave me his login to that service. And so now, at the drop of a hat, I can now dig into anything that you could think of, every single snap that happened. Yeah. So just to give you guys a sort of insight on my process, is it really goes from scratch. What's different between me and you, Bob, is during the season, I'm doing analysis for different websites and things. So I'm watching guys in real time a lot of times, or watching film in real time, where you're watching the Cowboys on Sundays. I'm not a Cowboy fan. I love the Cowboys. I love following the Cowboys because they're madly entertaining. But yes, I don't watch the games.
Yeah.
My son is a Cowboys fan, so I'm always up on what they're doing, and I live there in Dallas. And obviously, anyone who is a P1, there's no way that, with the way that you guys cover that team, there's no way that you could not be a Cowboy follower or a fan. You guys are so comedic about it, so passionate about it. Good or bad, positive or negative. Everyone has sort of their different angle. But so that's where you and I sort of differ, is I have a more sort of broad look at these guys over the course of time. And then obviously my son is the age of these guys. So right. Like last year's draft, T-Mac was a teammate of my son's in 7-on-7 stuff. So I have a personal relationship with him. I was also for a while in the combine training game. So I trained some of the so I understand, from multiple angles, from both the college coaching angle, the training angle, and the player angle, as a player, sort of what these different things look like. So that is, sort of the difference between our processes. Is I'm looking at guys essentially, all year over time. I'm actually watching ebbs and flows. Ruben Bain, for instance, he plays at Miami. It's my rival school. I'm a Florida State grad. So I see a lot of Ruben Bain and Hakeem Mesidor and, all these different guys. And so I watch sort of the progression of their careers, where you typically, not that you don't watch games on Saturday, I'm sure you do, but I'm actually watching the tape and doing analysis in real time.
When I watch
getting it, sort of watching the 200 snaps at the end of the season.
Yeah, when I'm watching the college football season, I have no idea. I mean, you got 20, 25, maybe 30 names, but when I'm watching Indiana, I don't know much about D'Angelo Pons until like today, when I gave him a couple hours of my day. And I mean, he's a nice player, and I would see like Todd McShay has him ranked whatever, but I didn't know him from Adam. By the way, he's really fun. We'll get to him in the corner episode, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But there's so ways to do this. My process has always been to try to get to at least 60 and as many as 80 players. And what does that mean? Well, that means I either have 12 weeks or I have 16 weeks. And each weekday, I can give each prospect his own day and his own couple hours. And that's the only way to do it, in my opinion, for me, is when the Cowboys get eliminated, which gets earlier and earlier sometimes. But this year it was like January 10th or so. I thought, okay, I can get started on the draft. I grabbed my first guy. It was Ruben Bain. And then every weekday, Monday through Friday, I'm grabbing another player. And so I called it the Sturm 60 because usually it's a 12-week window between the end of the Cowboys and draft weekend. But sometimes if they miss the playoffs or if I get a little creative and use Saturdays as well, I can get to 75 or 80. Call it the Sturm 60 every year because that's as far as I can go. And so far I've only done 30 guys. And so I think it's important for us to admit what we don't know. So I don't want to in any way give someone the impression that I've spent a couple hours on a player I haven't. So that's very useful because sometimes Dominic has guys on his list that I didn't even think about. That might even happen today when we do the edges. So without any further ado, let's actually jump in. And just to give you an idea, last year I think we did 10 episodes. This year we'll get to at least 8. We might do 10. I don't have any idea, but we're just going to start knocking them out. But like I said, we are going to supersize the defense this year, and even more so the positions that the Cowboys really need. Now, if you're not a Cowboys fan and you just love the draft, don't worry. We'll get to yours. I'm just not going to be able to promise as in-depth. We'll see. Let's see where it goes, Dominic. So the idea is each position group, we want to give you our individual top fives. So like I said, it's a beauty contest. It's subjective. And I am looking at it from a standpoint of Cowboy fits, but I'm not going to dock a guy if he doesn't fit for the Cowboys. I'm just going to tell you that I don't think he probably fits for the Cowboys. He'll still be eligible for my rankings for whatever that's worth. And then Dominic will certainly cross-examine my list and provide his own. And then next week when we do corners, we'll flip it around and he'll give his list and I'll volley off what he serves. And so we want to give you a brief rundown in these deeper positions. I realize a top 5 list does not help you on day 2 or day 3 because I think all 5 of these edges could very well go in the first round. But it's really, kind of the best we can do in this short time we have. So that's enough setup, Dominic. You ready to roll?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's do edges today. I think edge is one of those positions that the Cowboys should be really focused on right now. The draft position right now is 12 and 20. At the time we're recording this, they haven't done anything crazy like trade them both for Max Crosby. I'm going to assume they're not going to do anything that crazy, but you never know. It's professional sports, and we learn to roll with the punches. But for now, I'm going to assume they are shopping hard through these edges, and I want to give you a view on what I came up with. And
speaking of Max Crosby, I want to mention this. I meant to mention this when we were talking about our process.
Yes, sir.
Again, talking about tape over traits. There's going to be some guys that will have some character things, and I'm not saying Max Crosby does, but there's going to be some guys that have that. We're just looking at the tape. So it may be a guy that you say, oh, the Cowboys should never take him. He's got this issue off the field. We had, I believe it was James Pierce last year as an edge.
That's right.
And then we both mentioned that he had some red flags, but we both really liked him. And his red flag came to fruition. He's in jail, I think, right now, and maybe
I believe he is.
Yeah,
he has jeopardized his career.
So I just think it's important that we do mention that, hey, guys may have red flags, which may mean they go lower than we say. If I say a guy is a first rounder, I'm not saying that he will actually get picked in the top 32. I'm saying in an average year, in an average draft, without any sort of red flags or any other external circumstances, that player would go in the first round. So
Yeah,
I think
and
it's important to mention that not only with red flags, but just with players in general. I want to, because there will be a time where we'll review. I do want to even look at last year's draft and say, hey, where did we screw up? Where were we right? And there may be a guy last year that I said is a first rounder and he didn't go first round, and you go, see, you were wrong, and I'll go, well, no, he's a first rounder based off of the contribution that he gave, not based off of where he actually got picked. And the same
boy,
thing,
that's
second round and so on. I may say a guy's a third rounder. I may say he's going to go in the third round this year, but he's a first round player.
yeah. And you almost
Every
need to
year, it's going to be different.
you almost need to review after like year 1 and then again after year 3. I mean, there's so many ways these teams can evaluate guys. Like C.J. Stroud, after one season, everybody's like, well, that's a steal of the draft. And now if you did it again today, people would be like, I might like Bryce Young more. There were a lot of questions about C.J. Stroud. So anyway, it's complicated. What it also makes it complicated and in my mind a little bit weird is that somebody will say, I only have 12 first-round grades. And I will say, well, there's 32 picks in the first round, so what do you mean? When they give them a first-round grade in the NFL in front offices, that means this guy is a starter the second he shows up. And a second-round grade means we believe he will be a starter, but it might take a small amount of time. And then third round is, I believe he's a good backup now, and maybe he can grow into a star. So they have different definitions of what each grade means. So, again, not to muddy the waters, let's get down to business and start talking about guys. Let's do the top 5 edges. And you want 5 to 1, or do you want 1 to 5? How do you want this?
Let's go 5 to 1. Try to keep him around.
Okay, at number 5, this is the one that, because he is 5th, I had a lot of choices here, a lot of good ones, and I left a lot of players I like off the list. And I also recognize when I look at other, like the consensus list, I know this player is not as highly loved by everybody, but he does attract my eye, and that's important to me, of course, because it's my list. So at number 5 for me, I like the Clemson edge, T.J. Parker. He is 6'3", 265, and for me, he is the 3-4 edge, stand-up edge, out there in space a little bit. I want a guy who looks like he's big enough to handle runs to his side, but also fluid enough and athletic enough to get to the quarterback. To me, he's a big hybrid. He's strong. He competes. He's got long arms. His 2025 tape, not as great. I was very interested in his athletic testing, and I think we were both pretty impressed with his RAS number, his relative athletic score. T.J. Parker is a controversial figure amongst draft people, and to put him on my list, I had to leave some dudes off that will upset many, including Mesidor. And so I put Parker at number 5 from Clemson.
Yeah, that's again, like you said, at 5, you could really probably there's probably 3 to 4 names at 5 that
yes
you can get stuck on, and they're all, you're not going to go wrong with any of them. Definitely impressed with his tape, and see him as a second round grade. Early second round, really good player.
Yeah. So the guys, well, we'll come back to honorable mention when we're done. Let's try to stay focused here, Bob, because that's something I'm not great at all the time. Okay, at number 4, this is in the range of where I could see pick number 20 start to talk about this a little bit, and that's Texas A&M's Cassius Howell. Now, what's interesting is I also like him at that exact same spot, but he did get knocked at the combine for short arms. Now, for me, arm length is a thing for pass rushers. There's no doubt about it. So for us to just, act like it's no big deal, I think that's disingenuous. It is a big deal, and the best pass rushers often have an advantage of long arms and what that allows you to do. Well, I mean, it allows you to do all sorts of things as a pass rusher, not only keeping the hands of an offensive lineman off you, but also being able to control with arm length. You see those strong arm pass rushes off the edge that are just so incredible, where you can basically get one arm on a 320-pound offensive tackle and sort of steer him around. And some of the strength at the NFL level is absolutely insane. So for Howell, what I loved about him, and he is a portal guy like so many guys on this list, but I loved the athleticism, the fluidity, the size. I think is really good for a stand-up edge. If he was, in a 4-3, those arms would make me way more concerned. But I think I like him more as kind of that stand-up edge again. And for that, I really love the attitude, and I know that gets a little bit more tough to read on just film, but this guy's intense. And honestly, that's an attribute I need for pass rushers. Is I need a motor that doesn't stop. I need relentless effort. And I also don't mind a guy who is barking at the guy across from him and kind of trying to get the attention of the offensive huddle. If you can get to the quarterback as much as he does, and you can sort of have the entire huddle looking at you and wondering why you won't shut up, that's attractive to me. I don't know if it's attractive to everybody, but I like it. The one knock on Cassius Howell I don't love, aside from the arm length, is I do think he can use a little refinement to his pass rush arsenal, in that if his original idea doesn't work, sometimes he does get stuck. It often does work. That's the good news, is that he doesn't usually need as many counters because he is just so doggone explosive, and he is a problem, and he can beat you. He's got that two-way go at times where he can get you inside or around the corner. So I love it, but I do think there's another level for him as we go. Cassius Howell at number 4.
Cassius Howell's my number 4 also. We're
Okay.
locked up there. Interesting thing with him is another year, another Texas A&M defensive lineman. Every single year where you and I are looking at somebody from Texas A&M that we're curious about, and in the top 5. This one actually shows production with 12 sacks this year, 27 hurries. Some of the past guys, we saw potential, but they didn't quite have the production, in terms of sack and pressure numbers, and this isn't one. I mean, this guy, he's got a great pass rush grade. His pass rush win rate is pretty high at about 20%, which puts him in the top percentile of guys. So this is a player it's very interesting because the production numbers are higher for him, but the sort of, I don't know, pomp and circumstance that surrounds him is a lot less than the guys we've talked about in the past. So the Shamar Stewarts last year.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. There was another defensive lineman that we had in
Nick Scorton was also in that group.
Every year there's one. So it's super interesting.
The knock on him, and I'm curious what you think of the arm discussion, because it comes up with Bain as well, of course. But the knock on Howell that Bain doesn't suffer from is that it kind of ended with a thud. Whereas Bain went all the way through the national championship game. So the bigger the podium got, the bigger the stage got, the better Bain played. Howell, it's not like he's a flat track bully or anything like that. It's not that he got all his numbers against bad teams. He didn't. He was very productive. He destroyed LSU's offensive line. He was really, really good at Missouri. Auburn, he was killing them. Arkansas was killing them, although, we could discuss that. The thing that keeps me from putting him front half of round 1 is in the Texas game and in the Miami game, those 2 A&M losses at the very end when they were undefeated and everything was good. He got a little quiet. So was he playing hurt? Was he run down from the season? Or did those, and by the way, the tackles on Texas and Miami are both studs. So I'm not acting like, he was going up against me or something. But it got a little quiet in those showdown games where you would hope that he would basically lead his team in splash plays or wow moments. And so that gave me a little pause on Howell and probably separates him from the top three.
Exactly. Yeah, he's the, sort of for me, the tiers would be makes you sit up. That's your Reuben Baines of the world. You're watching it and you can't wait for the next film, the next clip, or you got to rewind that one because it's so good you want to see it again.
Yep.
For me, Cassius Howell is a lean in. I'm not quite sitting up. It doesn't jump off, but it's okay. Yeah. I'm leaning in a little bit. He's a lean in, and so for me that puts him in that sort of top of the second round grade. He's not a for sure first rounder talent, and the arm length discussion is so interesting to me, Bob. He's in the 0.01 percentile in arm length, like it's historically short. Like that,
but then how
does
he get
something? That has to be something. But then
he's
12
in the
90th.
Sacks.
It's 12 sacks in the SEC, and he's in the 90th percentile in his 10-yard split. So again, he's got something that guys don't have. So and I guess that's what makes the difference between whether he's a substantial first rounder or a second rounder is.
Yeah.
There's something, and so to me it comes down to how you use them, when you use them, how many snaps does he play, because he can he play every snap? Probably not, and that's again, do you go spend a first round, expenditure on a guy that you can't play 60 snaps? And so that that's sort of a question that you'd have to ask inside your front office. And that's where that grade sort of comes in. But I struggle with, again, this the name of our show, Tape Over Traits. I struggle with looking at that and going, oh, I don't like him. He's no good.
Right.
He's never going to, because I just look at the film and he makes me lean in.
His tape was great.
I look at the film.
His tape was great.
And when I look at the film, I go, that's a good football player. I care that he can play football with his short arms. That matters to me more than just looking at his arms and going, nope, I don't care that I see him with my own eyes playing good football. That's all I need to see. That's all that matters to me is I want to see good football. I'm not going to be ruled by the tape measure.
When he's kicking my tail for the next 10 years, I can tell myself that he just didn't have another inch on each arm.
Yeah.
And that's that's the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so into the top three we go. Who'd you have at 5, by the way?
My 5 was actually not in your list.
Okay.
Keldrick Falk.
Okay, yeah.
So he's one of those.
I guess I had him. The thing with Falk is that I guess I had him 8th, and I promised we would circle back, but I do want to hear about your 5th. To me, he's giant, of course. In fact, if you look at him, you can see a little Calais Campbell, and I kind of wonder if he is a 5 technique. Now, he's not the same thing as Calais Campbell, but on the tape, it's just like this dude is bigger and stronger than everybody else. I feel like you must double team him, and I also feel he's just a baby at age 20. He's very active. The knock on him is, does he get to the quarterback enough? Is he in the backfield enough to give the type of value that would be required to get into the top 5? And so I struggled with that. I think it might be more scheme specific, but that's kind of where I netted out on Keldrick Falk. I love him. I just don't know that I don't know that how much I can invest in a guy who at times did not spend enough time in the backfield. I think honestly, September tape, he was very splashy. But as the season went on, and again, we don't know what these guys are dealing with just to play. Some of them are playing at 80% or 70%. But I saw a little less backfield explosion out of him as the season went on.
Yeah, 100%. Just so you guys just for a reference point, most of these guys' pass rush grades are going to be in the 80s, and his is 66. But his run defense grade is probably higher than all these guys. It's like 85 or something. It's so again, it's more what is your flavor. He had two sacks and 27 hurries. So what you're talking about in terms of sort of splashes in the backfield, that's not his game. So it's sort of what's your flavor. What are you looking for? Like you said, is he a 5 technique or a 9 technique? So this is where, sort of styles make fights. And you could have rotated for me at that 5 position just based off of your flavor. I love TJ Parker. I could have taken him there. There's multiple guys that I could have put there, and I just landed
R. Mason Thomas.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, there's guys.
And I landed there just out of getting sort of providing a different taste or flavor than the other guys in the group. Like I said, everyone else in the group is going to have very high pass rush grades and lower run grades, and this guy is going to have the highest run grade of my top 5. So I wanted to have one in there, and that's where I went. But he's not twitched up. That's the thing that sort of that's what goes a little different to what I typically have. Is usually guys that are twitchy and super athletic, and sort of they played tight end in high school or even in college. Those are typically the guys that I'm going to go for. So it's just kind of he's out of my typical liking at edge. But I love the fact that if I do need even a 3 technique, a pass rushing 3 technique or something like that, I can move him there. And I can play him as a 5 technique or a 4 technique in a 3 down front.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have to imagine our top 3 are the same 3 guys because I do think 3 guys are off on their own in this draft. Now they're all different players. We need to discuss them each, but is it fair to say your top 3 is some combination of Bailey, Bain, Reese?
No.
Ooh. Well.
I've got one in there, and I've already mentioned him as a potential Cowboy target also. So,
okay, all right. Well, then let me run through these, and then we can rate and debate. Arvell Reese and Ruben Bain, I guess to use draft terms, their tags are touching, which means the grade on the whiteboard is nearly identical. They're not identical players in any way, shape, or form. But if you want to say Bob has a tie for second or a tie for third or he can't decide and actually will go back and forth, and I can make the case that both of them belong as like a top 5 pick in this draft. All 3 of these guys got a cheat grade from me that I call high first round. And that usually there's like 5 to 8, maybe in a really crazy year, 10 guys. And then first round is usually the top 25 slots after the high first round. And then I go first, second, which is like 20 to 40. So I cheat my way through this a little bit to try to put them in the right neighborhoods. I think David Bailey could be the best player in this draft, personally. And then I think Bain and Reese are really good, but just a smidge behind Bailey. So if you make me place them right now, I would say Arvell Reese is my 3. And that means there are 2 guys in front of him, but that also, I want you to know, he could be the best player in this draft, Arvell Reese. The reason I have him 3 is I just haven't seen enough of it. He's really young. And the way Ohio State has such a football factory, they would only pass rush him in certain times. Like, if you go look for his actual edge rushing snaps in the Ohio State season, you will find games where he's not doing it at all. And you're like, what are they doing? Why are they not using this guy? Because honestly, if you had to say who's the player he most resembles, it's freaking Micah Parsons. Like, there is such an amount of sick speed, explosiveness, twitch, however you want to say it, bend. Like, he does look like a freak. But why do I have to go searching for his pass rush snaps? Well, they might say because we're so loaded and we have so many guys and we have so many guys who can do multiple things, including Reese, that some weeks we want him to do A, but other weeks we want him to do C. And we're not putting our defensive game plan together for your draft preview tape. We are doing it to win another national title, which they darn near almost did again. So I don't know what to say, except every player on Ohio State's defense looks like an NFL player. We're going to talk about a bunch of them this spring. And Arvell Reese is absolutely fantastic. He has it all. Twitch, fluidity, quickness. It's just he's young. And there are times, especially down the stretch from like November 1st on, where the amount of damage he did on a quarterback is incredibly small, incredibly unimpressive. And you would like to see, like Cassius Howe, your best tape as the season ends, which is what, again, Bain and Mesidor did so well. And so I think if he stayed in another year in college, any of my concerns would be wiped off. And I'm not even sure I have concerns. Arvell Reese is an absolute stud, and he probably shouldn't be around after the top 5. And yet, this edge class is so loaded, I think he's my third, and I even feel weird saying that down.
Yeah, go ahead and go on to your number 2.
Okay, at number 2.
He's phenomenal. He's great.
At number 2 is a completely different player, Ruben Bain. Ruben Bain is a good 30 pounds heavier than Arvell Reese, and he is his hairline looks like I did at age 21 in terms of I'm not sure it's going to be around much longer, buddy, but at least you're going to be extremely rich and famous. He has power. He has disposition. He has an arsenal of moves that would be clinic tape on how to rush the passer. He knows what he's doing. And to find out that he was doing it with real short arms makes it even more impressive. Now, I will say with him, arm length and wingspan are different, and I think his wingspan is way closer to normal, which means he has a broad chest. And so there are many things physically that might be a little deceiving, which is why we will tell you again, watch the freaking games and watch Ruben Bain and watch him do whatever he wants to do. I'm a little concerned with how wide we put him because I'm not sure he's a real chase down guy on the edge. I think he is athletic enough. I just think I'd like to probably use him a little more inside the tackle box. I think he could be a nickel down DT, honestly, the way he could handle things inside. Look, he's definitely not DeMarcus Ware, but he's a different type, maybe an old school defensive end, maybe more of a 4-3 guy, which is fine because nickel is base, as we know. And, how does anybody watch this college football season and not walk away thinking Ruben Bain is a stud? He is. I love him. He's a top 5 pick, and there you go.
Yeah, I got to see it in person, and like I said, he plays for the rival school, and I have nothing negative to say about him. He's just a phenomenal player and deserves to be in it's impossible that he can make it to 12 to the Cowboys. He's too good.
Okay, and at number 1, I never thought I'd have a Texas Tech pass rusher as my number 1 player, probably in the draft, but definitely at this position. He's a double-digit sack guy right out of college, I think. His potential's off the charts. Every down he can play. He has size. He has twitch. He has bend. He has motor. He won't even wear gloves. He's so old school. He's out there with bare hands, which you never see in the trenches anymore. Um, I was blown away. In fact, when he arrived at Texas Tech, people said he'd be blown away, and I got super cynical, and I'm like, oh, we'll see about that. I mean, Stanford to Texas Tech. Why isn't he in the SEC or the Big Ten or something like that? Well, look, Texas Tech had a defense that we might look back in 10 years and call it historically great. It was unbelievable. Watching them play Oregon in that bowl game was so sick. They were so good, even though they had really no chance to win that game because their offense was so bad. But David Bailey's the truth. I do see the double-digit sack guy to be a real rare thing, and yet I'm pretty convinced that's him. Usually guys with his traits are not, they don't have 260 in their potential. I do think he could play a little heavier. I think he was probably, I don't know what he weighed at the combine, but I know he was listed all year at low 250s. But I think he could get bigger if he wants. But I think he's plenty explosive, and he has that chase down that I love from the stand up edge. And so I love David Bailey. I think he's incredible.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you my my top three. And
let's go.
Tell you sort of what happened. So at number 3, I have Messidor. I love Messidor.
I do too.
I don't feel like my assessment of him matches the consensus. Maybe it does. I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time looking at other people's stuff, but I don't feel like he gets talked about enough. And I'm not positive.
Do you think it's all? Well, I mean, he's going to be 25 on opening day, right?
And that might be it. Yeah, that's the might be it. He's 25
now.
He's 25.
Now let's say this, and I didn't mean to cut you off on Messidor. I want to hear it all, but I do think it's important to say this: if you're a team playing for now, which the Cowboys should be, then you probably shouldn't be too worried about a second contract. You should be worried about getting guys who can step in September of 2026 and whoop some tail. And Akeem Messidor can be that guy. So I didn't put him in my top 5, but if I was playing for right now, which is this 3 or 4 year window where you still have Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Quinnen Williams all in their primes, then I would have no problem jumping on Messidor. So back to you, but I just wanted to say I didn't put him in my top 5 because he's so old, but I don't think that's why he's great. It's not like a guy playing against little kids and in that age advantage. I think he's been a excellent player for a long time. It is a concern, though, if I was rebuilding, that I would be drafting a guy who's going to be 29 when we have to talk extension. So that's weird. But if I'm the Cowboys, why would that concern me at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And that may be the reason why I have him so high because or actually let me go back. I did talk about on the Musers podcast with you. If he's sliding and you can trade that 12 spot and still get him as your first round pick at 20, you are really doing something. At 12, that's a little too rich for my blood because like you said, at 12, I got to go get a guy that I can have a shot at in my second contract. Okay. I don't want a 29-year-old with my 12th pick, for their second contract. I want to go get.
So who the heck did? I want to know who you left off now. This is driving me crazy.
So with him, 67 pressures, 13 stacks, 21% pass rush win rate. Just consistently gets a jump on the ball. Now, mind you, 67 pressures on a defense where the guy opposite you leads the country in pressures with Ruben Bain with 87 or something, 83. That's really hard. You don't give out 2 pressures on a play. So if Bain's getting 86 of them or 83 or whatever that number is, and he's leading the country, that doesn't leave a lot for you to also go get pressures. Bain also had 12 sacks himself. So you have 13, he has 12. How many opportunities to have sacks are there if he's getting them down 13 times that you're also there? So to put up,
No doubt.
again, this is the production over potential argument. It's hard to get those numbers when the guy opposite you is one of the best in the country. It's really, really hard. His production numbers should be way lower, and they aren't. They're as if he's a frontline pass rusher. If he was the number one and the only guy, those numbers are good enough. 13 sacks. If he was the leading sack guy on his team, or the only sack guy on his team, that number would be high enough. So, and also I will say 68 coverage snaps. So he drops a little bit. So now you're talking about versatility.
He can do it.
And he won 20 times on inside moves. So he's physical enough to beat guys on the inside. I really, really like this guy. And again, got to see him in person. And there were times where I thought he was better than Bain, or at least more explosive. I don't know if he's better. But there's just, or more splash. I shouldn't say explosive, but just,
okay.
I felt like there were times that he had more of a splash than Bain.
So who's two?
So 2 and 1 are the same to me. I really struggled with this because I love Bain, but I did think that David Bailey is probably the best defensive lineman in the country. And like you said, I think he may be the best player in the draft. So I couldn't put Bain in front of him, but then I did. I put Bain at 1, and it probably was because I watched it in person. I never got to see David Bailey play in person, and I watched when I watched Ruben Bain in person. And so I put Bain at 1, although I think that David Bailey is potentially the best player in the draft, which doesn't quite make sense, right? So I left off Arvell Reese, and the reason is these other guys have 500 pass rush reps. Arvell Reese has 100. So I'm going to have him in my linebacker ratings.
Okay.
And so I did not put him on here. But if I were rating him, there's no way I would have him below Mesidor. He would probably be. So mine would have matched yours. I would have had him at 3. I just thought that I want to see his edge rush numbers higher in order to rate him as an edge rusher. And I personally like the potential of him being an off-the-ball linebacker that edge rushes, similar to the early Micah, before he went to all edge or all D lineman towards the end of Micah's tenure with the Cowboys.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I didn't know what to do with him, but those pass rush snaps were pretty sweet.
They're as good as anybody. So you kind of want to put him there. But I sort of I probably projected my own thoughts in terms of if I was a defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And I would think of him as my linebacker, my hybrid linebacker. I wouldn't think of him as just an edge. So I think that's how I rated him, or at least that's where I put him.
Okay, so my top 5, Bailey, Bain, Reese, Howell, Parker. Your top 5, I think, if I did this right, Bain, Bailey, Mesidor, Howell, and Falk.
Yep.
Okay, so let's mention briefly. I know we should wrap this up, but I did want to mention the other 4 or 5 guys I did look at that we haven't talked about here. I guess there's 4 of them. R. Mason Thomas. I did not know I would like him as much as I did. He plays really fast, great moves, motor, really heavy hands, man. He can smack dudes around. He's just a little small. So we're going to use the term DPR, designated pass rusher, for some of these guys. I think he's better than a DPR. But I also wonder, can he hold up against the run? I like him a lot. He's a really nice top 50 player. I just don't know if I can go a lot higher than that. But if you watched Oklahoma this year, that dude's a clear and present danger. Those games he missed, they weren't the same defense. I think our Mason Thomas is a dude.
Yeah, and I'm good with him at 5. And swapping someone out, and I'll just add, I love the fact that he came into college like 215. That signals, and if I'm a pro team, I like that because he's just learning how to use that added weight strength. So his potential to me to become a pro, an all pro later in his career, to me is higher than maybe somebody who came into college fully developed and ready to go. So I
Okay.
like the potential that he has, and
Yeah.
like you said, heavy hands and really good athlete, and a guy who I think has a lot of growth, ahead of him.
Yeah, so my top, I mean, if you add my top five to three other guys I love in Mesidor, Thomas, and Falk, we're talking like 8 dudes that I could definitely say, man, you go get this guy. I think you feel really good about. You've probably added a starter for your defensive line. Now, I did 3 other guys, and I have varying levels of interest in each. I would not say I would get crazy about any of them, but from best to worst or least, I mean, let's be honest. If we're talking about them, they're going to play in the NFL. So it's not like these guys are useless, but they have some limitations. So the guy I like the most of this trio is Zion Young from Missouri. There's no reason he can't be great. It's just he's not there yet. He is, if you want to do a tape over traits, he would be traits over tape, where he is really long and tall and athletic. He just doesn't quite know what he's doing. Unrefined moves. I'm not sure he's going to be much use against the run. And so if you're a designated pass rusher, but your moves have a ways to go, then I don't know what to do with you on draft day. And I would kind of hope somebody else takes you so I don't have to deal with it. But, we could be sitting here in 5 years saying, how did we miss on Zion Young? He's clearly a problem at the SEC level. So I'm not gonna tell you he stinks. He doesn't stink at all. Romello Height from Texas Tech. I don't know, man. He gets to the quarterback, but it's all on speed. Who was the guy from West Virginia that was like this? He was a great designated pass rusher. Went to Seattle. I'm trying to remember. I mean, it's like a decade ago. It was Legion of Boom, but he was these guys who are pass rushers, but they do it all on speed, which basically means they're great with stunts where they can actually beat you to the landmark and just kind of outrace you to the quarterback. But if they can't do that and you can engage them, they're kind of not the same guy. He doesn't have, so I guess what I'm saying is if you can get a block on him, you don't have to worry about him nearly as much. I don't see the power. I don't see the physicality or the edge. And also, he's kind of old, too. But unlike Mesidor, he's old in a way where I feel like the clock is ticking against him. So he was really good in college, but I just don't know that he has the physicality at the NFL level to be worth a super high pick. So it's probably a no for me, dog, on Romello Height until like round 3. And then the one, I don't even know about day 2, LT Overton, who was a clear 5-star when he went to A&M and then transferred to Alabama. And I'm sorry, at both schools, I just haven't seen anything resembling like splash plays and production. Like, he's a guy. He can definitely be a guy out there and do his job, but he's not going to jump off the tape at you. And so I just wanted to mention each of those 3 guys, as there's varying levels of value, but I just don't think we're talking about the type of guy. With Romello Height, I was talking about Bruce Irvin. They're not exactly the same guy, but that's the guy I was trying to think of his name a second ago.
Got it. Yeah. Going to do our annual, tradition like no other. You're talking Texas A&M defensive lineman, LT Overton, transfer from Texas A&M.
Yep.
Interest, definite interest, but I don't know. And then Anthony Lucas, Texas A&M transfer to USC, both second day guys that I don't quite have in that, sort of our what we have as our number 5 ranking, but guys that have some interest, that have some something that sparks your curiosity, but just never quite satisfies what you're looking for. We're doing this every year when we get to the Texas A&M guys, either guys that are there or guys that have transferred out of there or guys that transferred into there. Or it just seems like for some reason they have a magnet for this guy that is a lot of potential, I guess, and you just don't know what you're going to get from them at the NFL level. So those are two guys that I wanted to mention that I thought I'm interested in, I'm intrigued in, but like you said, sort of various levels of interest or sort of sort of a cost benefit analysis when you get to them. It's like, man, I can't go first 2 rounds with you, and especially if I don't trade down and gain some other picks from it.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting with A&M, and I think I said this last year. A school that produces Von Miller and Myles Garrett clearly knows what they're doing with pass rushers.
Correct.
But it's weird that they don't have those double-digit sack guys off the edge as often as you think. Now, Cassius Howell is clearly a revival in that direction, and maybe they have with Elko have started to figure out what type of guy they're looking for a little bit better. But Jimbo would bring in 5 stars, and we would hear that they're going to take over the world, but it would just never happen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I said like 45 minutes. We went over an hour again. That's our tradition here. We're gonna try to do better next time. I think we're doing corners next time, Dominic.
We are corners, and I'm serving.
Okay, Tape Over Traits will be back soon. We get to corners, then we get to linebackers, and like we said, this will be a heavy defensive focus here for our first batch of these. But we appreciate you staying with us, however you're consuming this, and we will talk with you next time on Tape Over Traits. So long.